Hi, everybody. This is Willem Dafoe. So the way this usually works is I introduce our panel or our guests. So since you're sitting here,
I was sitting in line. I mean, I thought I might as well join you.
so here's the beauty of it. So I get to say, ladies and gentlemen, the last couple weeks, our guest of honor today has won the Best Supporting Actor Prize from the LA Film Critics Society, Boston Film Critics Society, New York Film Critics Circle, National Board of Review, and just yesterday he was nominated for a Golden Globe. Willem Dafoe, The Florida Project. So this film premiered at Cannes back in May, and then I saw it in Toronto this past September. The way way the people are reacting when they see this movie, like how does it feel for a movie that's so fundamentally different from anything you've ever done to get this kind of attention? Why do people love Bobbie?
It's great. Well, just the movie. I think it's was made organically, and it's a movie that doesn't have industry fingerprints on it. To tell you the truth, it's made very homemade movie, very personal movie, and the strongest fingerprint is the director's, Sean Baker, who is a great director and a very courageous director. And what's distinctive about it is the story is very specific. It speaks about a world that we don't talk too much about. And also there's a lot of unconventional, non-traditional casting. So it's not like a movie that is preceded with a big cast list. It's nice to see it kind of be seen. Of course, this has a lot to do with A24 being very savvy, good taste, and very savvy how they release a movie. But it's real, it's really gratifying when you make something and people respond to it, and it feels like they're responding to it on its own merits in a funny way. It's not front-loaded.
Okay, well, Sean Baker, you describe him as being an adventurous filmmaker.
Courageous.
Courageous. What exactly do you mean when you say he's courageous?
I mean, first of all, he has a great film culture, and as I say, he makes a very personal film, and he goes to a place where he almost does documentary research and gets to know a place, and then with that knowledge, I mean, it parallels the work of an actor, really. He goes to a place that is not necessarily his place, and he creates a relationship to it and learns something about it. And with that new knowledge, he makes a story that's like basically a reaction to knowing that place. So he's very good at mixing factual things with something that he creates. So courageous in the respect that he's got a lot of skin in the game, and it's all personal, and it's new. There's the only model is the model of his experience, and his experience of something that really exists.
So, Bobbie, the motel manager, he's really the soul of this movie, and it's also a character, especially because of the dynamic with the rest of the cast, unlike anyone you've ever played in 4 decades and more than 80 films. So how did you really immerse yourself into that world?
Well, the funny thing about a character like Bobbie is you don't know what it is until you get there, in a funny way. There's a very strong screenplay, but you don't really know. And the approach was very practical. I tried to learn the things that he does in the movie, and that is be a motel manager. So that's the key. So I become a motel manager. And almost all the scenes are about dealing with some sort of crisis or fixing something. And how he does that is different in each case. So he's a character that wears a lot of hats. But I think what's most surprising about him and most gratifying in a funny way is, at first sight, he's not a extraordinary person, let's say. He doesn't seem to be an extraordinary person. He's very normal, working class guy. But he's got a good heart, and that's expressed by what he does, and it's not like a self-conscious or even self-aware altruism. It's practical. He wants peace, and his dealing with these people is sort of practical. He feels a responsibility for them. This is like a whole society unto itself, this motel where these people are living for a long term. And they're in very challenged situations, so he's got to figure stuff out. And so he's like a very unheroic hero, and a good man, which is you can't decide to play it. That has to happen as you play it.
Also, it's a character that you don't get into the film with like, oh, this is what his background is. You don't really get to know a lot about the character. And then I read a quote from you that I thought was fitting for this film. That oh, don't worry. The quote is, "I don't know what a role is until after I've played it, and even then, it's for the audience to decide who the character is."
A little bit, yes. I think that's true. I stand by that quote.
Does that give you more freedom to sort of develop, in this case, especially working with trying to develop Bobbie on your own?
Yes, but I mean, the pressure isn't to try to convey something necessarily or tell the audience something. It is to inhabit the character. And then it is what it is. And that's why I respond so much to strong directors, because I feel safe to do that. If I feel comfortable with a director that structures things in such a way that if you're present and if you're really engaging with the story, it will sort of express itself. I think sometimes if you anticipate what its effect is or what you want the audience to think, you're limited in your impulses. You're limited in, you don't tap into your intuition. So this is one of those beautiful situations where you really concentrate on just the quality of being there and the quality of reacting. Keep in mind, there's a really good screenplay, but we're also, every day, we're loose. This is guerrilla filmmaking in some ways. We're because of weather, because of things that crop up, we're inventing things and we're improvising some.
This is a film that you're the odd one out in this case, because the other players are first-timers, non-actors, kids, and you've been making movies for 40 years. So because of that, did it sort of like make it invigorating?
Of course. And somewhere you want every time to be the first time. You want to go back to that beginner's mind, be a student, learn it. You don't want to just lean on things that you know. And it's exciting because you see these people, they have nothing to compare it to. There's no, there's a pride, but there isn't kind of a careerist professionalism. They're in this, and they're engaging in this project as if it's going to be the first and last thing they ever do. So there's a kind of passion and a kind of all-in quality with first-timers. They may lack certain kind of knowledge about, technical stuff. They may have trouble repeating things, but Sean Baker is a very good director, and he makes them comfortable, so he works around them, But they were very present, and they were great to work with. And the truth is, my job was to fit in with them, to be in that world. And somewhere, that's what I aspire to do all the time, because I'm not there to do a show. I'm there to be a human being and tell stories that, explore or celebrate what's great about being human.
So here at SAG-AFTRA Foundation, we take questions from the audience. They write them down on these cards right here. So Shauna Gin, hi Shauna, how are you? Would like to ask you, what was enjoyable or especially inspiring inspiring is a great word, about working on this project and what was challenging about working on this project?
It's funny. You learn most of your things intuitively. What was inspiring was just, the story that there was a shift where we were shooting at this place and the people that were living there, because it was a functioning motel. So, sometimes the office staff would be in there checking someone in, and we'd have to wait and until we could go in and do the scene. And also they helped us, They helped us to, particularly me, to know what the duties of the manager was and hear stories about what kind of challenges they had and what things went down there. And that kind of research really inspired Sean to write the story that he did. So I guess the fact that we're at a place, we get to know those people, and they become us. And that's a beautiful thing when that shift happens, when someone is out there and you think of yourself and them, and then you get a new knowledge of them, and they are you. And of course, as an actor, that's very helpful, because that's that's kind of our job a little bit, to inhabit, give other people their day in court, So that, I guess, is inspiring, that actually happened. I got to know those people. And so I wasn't seeing them as these poor people. I was identifying with them, and I started to see what we have in common, and I started thinking that could be me. It's just different circumstance. So that's what was that was what was inspiring. What was challenging, I suppose, would be that thing that I talked about before, is fitting in, And when I say fitting in, I mean really being there and not getting impatient, and being not going to, not having any separation with the people. I mean, the other people that I'm working with, because they're new. No, I didn't get on a high horse and start telling people what to do. I didn't need to. They were excellent. So it was just staying calm, staying in it, and really blending in and having the world and the story and Sean show me the way.
I have 2 words for you. I just want you to just go. Brooklynn Prince. She's magnificent in this movie.
Oh, fantastic. She's, these kids were kids. They were kids first. That's how Sean set it up. Now, Brooklynn, probably came out of her mother's womb tap dancing. I mean, she's a born performer. And unlike some of the kids who actually come from this kind of situation, her mother is a acting teacher, so she had some knowledge, and she was a great improviser. That scene where they're in the restaurant, they just kept the camera on her, and Sean would feed her lines, and she also improvised some. So that was a long sequence of her just, them just riffing between Sean being next to the camera. How do you like those berries? Say something about the berries, this kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And her mother.
Oh, fantastic. Bria.
Yep, she was great too.
And she was found on Instagram. She's not
that
normally.
Story. I don't think a lot of people know that story.
Well, I don't know the whole story, but I think Sean was following her on Instagram, because he's on that kind of thing, and
as we are, be honest, we have to be. Yeah, we do.
Okay. No, help me. I'm just ignorant, about these things. That didn't come out right. I don't have a judgment about it. I just really don't know. I really don't.
Yeah, he
but
did find her on Instagram.
He saw her on Instagram, was a fan, and I remember it's really for him to tell the story, but I think I can tell the story correctly. Basically, he had some pressure to cast a A-list actress and the industry actress, and certainly the role is good enough that you could attract that, and even for a low-budget movie. and he just loved Bria's sense of humor and the way that she presented herself, and just was a really full personality. So he kept on thinking about her, and finally he got in touch with her and said, "I want you to be in this movie." And initially she thought it was a joke, because that's not what she was looking for. But then once they contacted each other, she said, okay. And then they started to work, and Sean's partner, Samantha Kwan, worked with her because she's an actor and also an acting coach. So it has a happy story. When I arrived and I first met Bria, and she was living in that, not living in that room, but I first met her in that room, and it was so inhabited, and she was so much the character that I thought, where'd they find this woman? Yeah. I really thought she might live there. That's how deeply, inhabiting that role she was.
Well, Rachel Dorval. Rachel, raise your hand. Roy. Okay, Rachel's here. So, hi, you're not Rachel. Oh, Raphael. Raphael! Okay, Raphael, Rachel, jet lag. Would like to know, what was your most challenging role and why? Raphael.
Let me ask you, what do you, I don't know whether you know how well you know films. What do you think it would be?
Can I guess?
Yeah, it's a fun guess.
I'm going to say Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah, but I don't have a good answer. No, I mean, I wish I did. Everybody wants a good answer. Last Temptation of Christ is a good one, just because it was so demanding, physically, emotionally. But it was a very happy experience. That's one of the strongest film experiences I've had. The difficult ones are the ones where they aren't quite working out, where you feel tight, or you feel like you can't find your way into things, or you have conflicts with, I'm always pretty much an optimist, and every day I kind of try to reset things. But sometimes you're in a movie and you think, not so much that you're working on a dog, but you're having a hard time finding your way into it, finding your way into investing it in a personal way. So I think the hardest ones are the ones that are closest to you. It's much easier to work with for me anyway, to work with a big mask. A classic example is something like Shadow of the Vampire, where I literally almost had a mask, and that was fun, and in a funny way, I would say almost easy, because, you're sitting in a makeup chair, you don't recognize yourself anymore, you don't feel like yourself, you're totally open, it's total reset, you've erased yourself, and you're ready to become someone else. And sometimes when people hear that, they think, oh, you don't care, it's kind of a technical exercise. Not at all, because I think classically, you have to cleanse yourself of who you are a little bit to open yourself to a new experience of trying to inhabit another story. Or at least I do.
You talk about
I
mask.
I tried.
Raphael, great question. So I'm never going to forget your name again. You talk about wearing a mask like you did in Shadow of the Vampire, which came out in 2000, and then 2 years later, you had a role where you wore a mask sometimes, and other times you didn't.
Yeah.
Of course, that's SpiderMan. So how was that different, playing like Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin?
Well, it was great because it was a double role, and also it was fun because the beautiful thing about Spider-Man, from an actor's point of view, was even in a scene, it would go back and forth between comedy and drama. Yeah. It was really such a hybrid. I think there's a dinner scene where literally it just wildly goes back and forth between really kind of arch and funny stuff, and then it kind of settles down to something quite heavy and quite cutting. And that's great fun to do if you can find that rhythm. So that was, and also Sam Raimi, the beautiful thing about that was a big movie, but it was a personal movie. Somehow he felt so deeply about that character and that story that he was invested in a way that he wasn't distracted by all the effects and things. He could take care of it, but really that film is built on a good story and good characters.
Yeah, he's a fan, Sam Raimi, that's for sure. You know, also looking back to the first movie I really felt like I discovered you in, back in Philadelphia, where I'm from, was 1986, Platoon. And what a role, what a movie. And you worked with Oliver Stone a couple of times. How did working with Oliver Stone on Platoon compare to when you did it 3 years later on Born on the 4th of July?
Well, it's colored very much by the roles because Platoon was very much an ensemble film, and I had a very beautiful role. And Born on the 4th of July, it was a beautiful role, but it was really quite brief. And a beautiful scene that I have with Tom Cruise where we're fighting in wheelchairs. Yeah. I knocked him out of his wheelchair. Because he was feeling sorry for himself. Yeah. And that wasn't working too well with my character. No, they were both good experiences. They were quite different. Also, Platoon was a little scrappy, independent movie that took 10 years to get done. And Born on the 4th of July, you had a bona fide movie star in Tom Cruise, and it was a much bigger budget, and Oliver was much more established by then. So the feeling of those movies, Platoon is closer to my heart because it was closer to the beginning, and we had great camaraderie, and this was a little movie that really broke through. So that's a very dear experience to me.
What made you want to become an actor in the first place? Do you remember?
I don't remember specifically, but I started, when I was a kid, I used to write plays and things, and there were always things like historical dramas like Cortez or the Alaskan Gold Rush, So I did that, and then I worked in community theater, and it was a social thing. It was fun, and it was telling stories. And I grew up in a paper mill town in Wisconsin. It was, I wouldn't say an escape, but it was connecting with the world that was someplace else. So I think that was one thing, and also my parents used to sometimes take getaways to Chicago, and they'd come back with these little Super 8 movies, particularly horror movies, and we had a little Bell and Howell projector, and I remember, I'd play movies over and over on that thing, and I grew to like movies when I was very young, but I never really formally formed the idea of being an actor, because I always assumed that I'd grow up and I'd do something else. But then I started working when I was quite young, very modestly, in a small theater that I was with for 27 years in New York. And we worked every day. So that was my training. So I never had like the classic kind of thing of wanting to be somewhere. I was dealing with the situation one step at a time. And I think it was very much a product of where I grew up. I didn't know anybody that was making their living as an actor. I didn't know anyone that was an artist. I didn't know anyone in the entertainment field. So it didn't seem like a reasonable thing to think that it could happen for me. So in a funny way, I was kind of stupid and lucky.
How did you get your SAG card?
Probably on Heaven's Gate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, or either Heaven's Gate or Catherine Bigelow's first film called The Loveless.
Heaven's Gate, talk about a rite of passage to get your SAG card, my goodness.
Yeah.
When push comes to shove, you're stuck on a deserted island, and you have one movie, your favorite movie of all time.
That's the best, worst question I've ever heard in my life.
It is definitely the best, worst question. Like, we all have a favorite. Number one.
Number one. Oh no, it's terrible. I will say this. When I was a kid, I remember watching both Lawrence of Arabia and also Gone with the Wind, like back-to-back screenings.
That's 8 hours.
Yeah. That says something.
Good taste.
But that's a lot of movies ago. So, the nice thing is I'm not stuck. My taste in movies is always changing and always adapting.
Over the years when you were like really getting into the thick of it, what was the best advice that you got that stayed with you? So when you really got into it, you just remembered this? Like who was a good mentor to you?
Breathe.
Breathe is good. I think we're all doing that right now.
Because we forget. We do it, but we forget.
So in terms of...
I mean that seriously. Whenever I get stuck, it sounds like the simplest thing in the world, but ride your breath. You'll find a new place,
In terms of like the types of roles that you look for, how has what you look for in a role changed over the years? Or has it?
I think in a funny way I've gotten more reckless because when I was younger, I think I was more conscious of typecasting and more worried that I'd be boxed into a thing and I'd become a thing. I'd be frozen as believing myself that I could only do certain things. And an actor's job isn't necessarily to do all kinds of things, but you want to be fully engaged. You want to have it, do what you approach with a passion and with all your brains and all your body and all your heart. So to do that, you got to mix it up. The jet lag's setting in.
Well, on behalf of everyone here at the SAG-AFTRA Foundation screening today, keep mixing it up. And bravo on the Florida project. Okay. Congratulations on everything. Okay. Thank you so much for being here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.